Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. April Tsai is an intuitive guide and therapist helping people heal their inner stories and awaken their most true desires. Her approach focuses on compassionately clearing generational patterns and limiting beliefs to attract abundance. Her healing mentorships weave shamanic journeying, spirit detachment work, and psychic mediumship with talk therapy to liberate you on your life's path. I met April in January at a women's gathering and instantly felt drawn to her genuine nature. She is kind, compassionate, honest, and authentic in living in integrity with her soul's purpose. Here is April. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for that intro. That was so sweet.
Yeah, thank you for you being you. You are such a delight. One of the most genuine, kind people I've ever met. Truly. Like, that's just what you wear.
Oh, thank you. I feel that way about you too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful for Spirit bringing us together.
I'm glad that we...
You know, some love is just like instant love. There we are. Okay. Doesn't have to be hard. It gets to be easy. Not to say that there's not...
We found each other, that's for sure. Spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that there can't be challenges in easy relationships, but I think the coming together felt really of ease.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Thank you, Sierra, for creating that space and for joining some incredible hearts together. It's been sweet. You have this ability to provide this sense of warmth that I've haven't come across before in the way that I've come across with you. And I know that that's taken a lot of diligence, taking the time to deeply provide that for yourself. So what has that been like for you to really go in and do the work and to meet yourself where you're at? I know it's been a process, but if you could share a little bit just for background.
Yeah, definitely have not always been warm with myself. And so I think the work has looked like going through social work school and like going to school to be a therapist really invites you to look at your stuff, which I'm really grateful for because before that, I didn't have that awareness. And so I'm really grateful for the like formal education that brought me to looking at shadows and stories and trauma and the stickiness of my origin story and my upbringing, and to treat myself with compassion, because that's what I was trained to do, is to treat other people with compassion. So I think going through that type of formal education like really brought that lens of warmth and compassion for myself. And then getting more into like the spiritual work brought an extra layer of compassion, because it showed me that unity consciousness, like we're all just doing the best we can. We're all working through stuff together. So I think that kind of more like holistic spiritual lens paired with that formal education brought me to a place of really sweet gentleness with myself. And it's still a process, but I appreciate you feeling it and reflecting that I am reflecting that when I come into relationships. And there's so much more.
I see it. Go ahead.
There's just so much more like on the journey.
Share whatever feels.
I mean, I just think it looks like that shadow work that I never had words for. But specifically what's coming up is like the shame piece of it. The shame piece of our darker side, or our parts that we don't necessarily want to show people. I think over the last 5 years, I've started making friends with that piece of myself, or those pieces of myself, And the more I make friends with it with myself, the more I can make friends with it within other people and give them grace and realize that what I see in myself is also in them. So let's just let our shadow sides hang out together and not have to like stuff them down and quiet them down, because otherwise there's this unspoken energy between me and the other person. Like, ooh, can I really be myself? Can you really be yourself? So I think as I've learned to start shedding and making peace with that part, I'm able to show up with that warmth because I'm not necessarily afraid of that coming out from the other person.
That's such a good word. Yeah, I think that's huge. You and I think we talked about that the first time we really were able to share a little bit more space in conversation and shadow work specifically. And it's potent. And I think with your origin story, I know a little bit about it, and I would love for you to share a little bit more, because I'm sure there's been a lot of shadow that's come up in your reparenting of self and just kind of revisiting some hard places.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit about my origin story is that I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional home with 4 brothers. So it was like a lot of energy, a lot of needs not being met. My parents struggle with addiction, drugs, and alcohol, and we were living in a lot of poverty. So a lot of neglect and abuse happening. And when I was 14, I received download from spirit to go look for an emancipation, like a lawyer, and start the emancipation process, which in Wisconsin basically looks like, that's where I'm from, proving to the court why I should not legally be bound to these parents. And that went through. And so by 14, I was, I don't remember what they call it, like a ward of the state. So I was kind of like on my own. And I had a guardian at the time. And so it wasn't like completely on my own or in the streets or anything, but I had this break in my family of origin and my lineage. And it was the best decision that I could have ever made for myself. But there was so much shame that came along with that, of breaking off from my family and making a choice to honor my needs and what was healthiest for me at the time, and being met with resistance from family members, from community members. I grew up in a really small community. So it was this moment of, I think, the first big initiation of choosing myself over people pleasing, choosing myself over societal or familial conditioning that says blood is loyalty and you must be loyal to your blood no matter what. So that breakthrough at such a young age, I think, set me on this trajectory of consistently checking in with myself and my intuition about what's best for me. And although that has been really challenging since then, because when you're surrounded by people who don't necessarily do that, there can be a lot of pushback. Like, how dare you choose a life that's better for you if it means that you're leaving this community or this family or whatever organization that you've been part of. And so since then, even before 14, because even before that, I wasn't experiencing my needs being met by my parents, I have been on this path of reparenting myself. I would say once I turned 18, it really started to go off, because at that point, then I didn't have any relationship with my guardian or my parents. So I really felt like this sovereign being. At the time, I didn't see it as sovereignty. I saw it as lack compared to so many of the people in my life, because I didn't know anybody who had ever done that before, who had emancipated. So it felt really lonely. It felt shameful, felt confusing. And I had to really start figuring it out and doing the work of, Why do I feel shame around a choice that I made? Why do I feel shame around listening to my intuition? And how can I meet that part of me that feels that shame and just bring her so much love and be proud of her for the choices that she made on her behalf? And what a journey it's been, because it wasn't necessarily something that you're taught in school to reparent yourself. And when I went to college for social work and to become a therapist, we did start learning some of those things, which was really enlightening to me, because I had never heard concepts like you're not defined by your trauma, or you can start building communities that support you versus just allowing yourself to default to the ones that you've been given. And having this very solution-focused approach to healing through the trauma-informed lens that I was learning from in school felt so permissioning to me to just meet myself where I'm at and realize that I could create the life that I wanted. And I think that's where some of that reparenting comes from, is like, when I think of reparenting, it's, well, what kind of parenting do you want? And then creating that for yourself, which is so empowering that you get to actually choose what kind of parenting you want. Even if you do have healthy parents and you've had a positive experience with them, there's always room for you and your unique needs to be met through the process of reparenting, meaning showing up for yourself in a way that's uniquely supportive for you, the special, unique being that you are with your own needs. You get to create that. So I was doing that from kind of this Western psychology, social worky lens up until about 6 years ago, when I had this deep spiritual awakening, if you will, or divine intervention, I like to call it, of spirit calling me out and saying, okay, like, yes, you've had these realizations about trauma and reparenting, but let's take it a step further and bring in your ancestors that have died and bring in spirit guides to support you on this soul journey back home to yourself. And that just added this incredible layer of feeling a sense of belonging in my body, in my story, in my spirit, that I really don't believe I could have felt if I didn't go down this path of energy healing and shamanic work. I think I would have done a lot of healing just with that framework that I was mentioning from my education, but I think there was a limitation. It wasn't so much about the body and the spirit, it was about the mind. Like, my mind could conceptualize reparenting or moving through trauma, but my body and my spirit couldn't feel that until I brought in these other techniques, or spirit brought in these other techniques for me.
The body,
yeah,
such a piece of wisdom and discernment.
Yes. Yeah. It felt like everything I was processing in the mind.
So what
just
has that
went
process
down.
been like for you?
Which one? The body?
Oh, sorry. I think we have a lag, but
Yeah.
The body. Yeah. If you could just further extend a little more conversation on the body and what that integration was like, because if you were, had that been something that you were aware of, or I know that spirit brought it to your intuition to go deeper, but what was that like for you to kind of discover that?
It was really painful, because it was as if everything I was processing in the mind, realizing like, okay, this isn't my fault that this happened. This was trauma. This was, parenting the best that they could. I could conceptualize that in my mind and clear it, but it felt like it all just went down into my body. It's not like I was clearing it. I was just pushing it down. Like, I was thinking my way through it, which then pushed it further into my body. And how that showed up for me was, I think maybe I was starting the journey that some people experience as like chronic pain. I'm not someone who has really experienced that, but I think I was at the start of that process if I didn't do anything different. So my body was like tense and my shoulders just were like up to here. I was always holding my shoulders up here, and I had chronic stomach aches and my hips were locked up. Like I could barely do like a butterfly pose. And I just noticed this closing in and holding and tension. And luckily, it got so bad that I realized something's off. Like I can't keep living like this where I'm having these stomach issues and pain all the time. And that's right around the time when this big message came through from spirit that I needed to leave the world of being a traditional therapist. Those two things coincided. So it's like I was having this physical body pain, and then I got this big message from spirit that what I was doing for my work, spending so much time, 40 hours a week or more, doing wasn't in alignment. And so I could see the parallel of that. Like there's something I'm doing in my work that's keeping me from doing my work in the body that is going to kill me or like put me in a state of complete depletion. So I feel really privileged that I received those messages before it got so bad that, I don't know, I couldn't reverse it. Not that I think it's ever a one and done situation where you can't heal your body, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it felt approachable for me to heal. It didn't get to the point where I couldn't absolutely do something about it. So that was the time when I was introduced to Reiki and energy healing, and went and saw a psychic and an energy healer and had these experiences where I had these big releases in my body. It felt like therapy for my body and my spirit. And I felt so much leaving my body when I did these sessions. And I noticed that the stomach ache started loosening up, the tension started lightening up. And I could see the connection of releasing trauma and releasing pain. And then I was fascinated, like, how can I start playing with this? Because I want to help people. And I love helping people, and I love clearing stories and clearing space for people to create new stories. But right now I'm just doing it from this headspace as a traditional talk therapy practitioner. And I want to get into people's bodies and their spirit, which is when I learned Reiki and started having all these psychic experiences of mediumship and working with people's dead ancestors and getting really quick downloads about their traumas. And I believe I was getting those downloads just as a way of witnessing them so that the story could leave their body and they could experience less pain. And then I started doing the Reiki on myself too, and clearing more and more and more. And today, things come up in my body, but the fact that I don't feel that constant stomach ache or tension is just miraculous to me. It's a game changer. And I want that for everybody who feels pain in their body, because I do believe that it's linked to some kind of story that's wanting to get our attention or wanting to just be witnessed and held. I think that pain wants to be part of our reparenting. Like if that pain is a child trying to get our attention because its needs aren't met, how would we meet it? We wouldn't like beat it out of us or force it out of us. We'd talk with it. We'd energetically soothe it. We'd play with it. And that's what that approach was like for me with energy healing. And that's how I approach my clients too, is with a curiosity about their pain.
That's really beautiful. And to know that now you're using the medicine that facilitated you in your own evolve to now support others in that same way is really, really special and honorable. You know, I think to use your service to help expose those darker places within someone else's life to then allow them to potentially get the tools to create more space. Yes. Yes. I'm so curious to hear how you interweave these modalities with your clients as a form of medicine. Like, how do you, is it kind of just a generated experience that you have to create with spirit, or is it a co-creation between you and your client? How does that kind of transpire?
I like that question. I see it as a triangle. It's like spirit, my client, and me. And the way that I approach it is that each of those entities I just named, spirit, my client, and me, we all have our own divine counsel and our own divine spirit team that comes to the table. And so how I love to start my sessions and my ceremonies is calling those most relevant, pure, and loving guides to the table to approach whatever healing is ready to happen for this person. And in that way, I can never predict what will happen, which is fun and also an act of surrender for me and for the person that I'm working with, because it's such an honor and gift that they trust me and they trust my team and they trust the way that I'm calling spirit in to just open to whatever wants to be seen, witnessed, and cleared. So every session looks so different. Sometimes it's a lot more processing verbally. Sometimes it's complete silence and we're just working in the energy field. Sometimes I'm channeling the guides for them and with them, or I'm asking them to channel their guides for them and with them. I get myself into a space of openness as an oracle, as a channel, to see whatever spirit wants to guide us into that day. And of course, there can be intentions. People generally come in with like, I have this theme that's coming up that I'm noticing, or I have this pattern, or I have a physical pain that I would love to tap into. And so, of course, they can bring intentions. But from that place, we completely open as conduits to a divine loving presence, to infinite intelligence coming through and showing us the way. And I love that because it's not necessarily the approach I had as a therapist. That's not really what we're taught, to like surrender to this greater presence. It's more of, this is the data, the science, the theory. This is how you'd use that theory. So it's very linear, I believe, at least in my experience as a practitioner in that way. Whereas as a guide, an intuitive guide, it feels more like, okay, I'm getting out of the way. I'm creating a safe space to welcome in loving presence that will then do the healing, practice the medicine for us. And we have will as humans participating in this, me and the client, to discern like, okay, that feels good. That doesn't. Of course, that gets to be part of it. But I think that's the reparenting, is like letting spirit be the parent with us so that we don't have to have it all figured out. Letting the divine be our parent, our mother, our father, however you want to label it, so that we don't have to be the ones to know what to do in every circumstance, what to say, how to take care of ourselves. We can really lean in and surrender to that medicine. So even that act of trust, to come into a space where we're opening to whatever divinely wants to come through, is an act of surrendering to those that want to take care of us. And I think that's where a lot of my reparenting has actually happened, is not needing to know, and continues to happen. Like calling in my guides and my ancestors as my parents feels so soothing and like such an act of self-care, so that the child within me who felt neglect and abuse doesn't need to be the one to continue to hold the space, to continue to create the answers, to continue to find the resources, to trust that I get to be held by something, beings that I can't see, has been so permissioning and so healing for me, and continues to be for my clients too.
I feel like that's a beautiful segue to transition into you being pregnant, and you're 8 months pregnant, correct?
Yeah, almost 8.5 now.
Yeah, and this, that's so exciting. And this work, I know we were briefly talking about it before we started recording, but I just feel that the timing of this process for you and being an entrepreneur and doing this work and really reclaiming the sovereignty within your own life is just you already setting the intention to be a conscious parent, and you are conscious parenting as you've gone through this process. And I would love for you to share what this time and space has been like for you to integrate and interweave all that you've learned, all the work that you've dedicated with your clients, with you and your own personal work, and kind of how it's just, evolving into this beautiful encompassed container for you to step into motherhood.
Wow. It feels so big. And it is. What I'll say is it feels like the deeper layer of the physical manifestation of the healing coming online. Like what I first described with my education, that felt very mental healing. The past 5 years, although I mentioned the body a lot and what I just shared, that felt more of the spiritual and like the soul level healing, the quantum healing, the metaphysical healing. And with the pregnancy, it feels very physical healing. It feels like that layer is starting to become embodied, which I can honestly say for some reason, well, I know the reason, which I'll share. I didn't expect it. I expected it to be more of the spiritual still, or reparenting, healing from a spiritual sense. And the reason that I say that I didn't expect it is because I've received the feedback, and maybe it's because of the bubbles and the communities that I live in, being a spiritual entrepreneur, that pregnancy is like this very psychic, intuitive, spiritual experience. And I believe it is. But for me, I believe it's been a time to actually take some breaks from that space personally and become more embodied in the physical with this baby, with this pregnancy. And the reason that I say that is because I started reading, I think it was before I even found out I was pregnant. I was reading this book, Spirit Babies. And it's a book about connecting with your baby either before you conceive or during conception or during pregnancy. It's a great book. It's super fun and fascinating to read. But because I was reading that during the time that I found out I was pregnant, I had this thought that once I'm pregnant, I'll be super intuitive, super tapped into the baby's spirit, to his soul, his timelines, all like the metaphysical, ethereal stuff about him. And so I had this expectation. And what I realized over the past 8 months is that that's just not my journey with this pregnancy. I've tried to tap into his spirit. I've done the practices from the book to talk with him and communicate with him. I've shamanic journeyed with him, which is a practice that I do a lot with myself and my clients. And it's just not there. He doesn't want that for me in this experience with him. He wants me to just be in my body and have ease and not know what's coming. Because a lot of the reason I was wanting to connect is to find out about him, right? And like what lessons is he bringing? Who is he? What's his soul contract? What's his karma with me and my partner? Which was the recommendations from the book. And I've heard a lot of other parents talk about that, especially psychic, intuitive parents that get pregnant, that they've had these downloads about their child before they're born and all of this. And at first that was really frustrating and shameful. I'm like, I'm a psychic intuitive and I can't tap into the energy of my baby. Like, what does that mean about me and my gifts and my abilities? All these stories. I thought he was a girl. Like, I had these visions about him, and it was just so humbling to bring me back to just be in my body with him. Just enjoy the physical presence of ease and the sweetness of carrying him without needing to carry his karma or his story before I even get to know him in the physical. So all that to say, it's been a gift to not be as tapped in psychically with him. Even though I didn't see it that way at first, I'm just realizing that our bodies, when we're pregnant or not, will give us exactly what we need. And I know, just given some of the things that have happened to me and for me in the last year, I really need to be in my body right now. That's the major lesson. I spend a lot of time out here in the ethers, traveling, astral projecting, whatever you want to call it, for my clients. And that's been so healing in relationship with them. But to what cost? Because then I'm not in my body as much as I necessarily need to be enjoying this earthly experience too. So I believe the baby is helping me kind of swing back the other way. I kind of swung the pendulum, like, I'm going really spiritual and we're going to be shamanic journeying and talking to our guides and the dead. And now I think the baby's bringing back, like, can we just come back into a little bit more humanness? Can we enjoy the experience of having a body in the physical realm? And probably I'll come back, somewhere in the middle again through this birthing experience. And I, of course, still play in the ethers with my clients and in my own world sometimes when I meditate or do journeying. But I'm just realizing what a humbling gift it is to physically be connected with a being that is deeply wanting me to just be present in my body. It's such permission from him to just be human, just be, not need to know what's coming next, who he's going to be. I can find that out through meeting him in the physical. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to explore that when they're pregnant or preconception or wherever you're at on your journey. I fully support it. I think depending on where you're at in your spiritual journey or your physical journey, that baby or those babies will bring you exactly what you need at that time.
That's really beautiful. Oh my goodness. Ooh, I love that. The idea of the baby just not wanting there to be an expectation. That's just really refreshing.
Refreshing is such a great word for it. That's how it feels. It feels so refreshing and it feels easy. And this pregnancy has been easy. And I have had shame around sharing that because I know that that's not the case for a lot of birthing parents. And it kind of makes me emotional because I know how much of a gift it is for it to be easy for me, because that wasn't the case for my maternal lineages. And I think it's easy, or it's of ease, because of some of the work that I've done in my body and my spirit. And this gets to be fun and easy. Like, for whatever reason, I don't even need to psychoanalyze it either. This part of my life is meant to be of ease. And it doesn't do anybody any favors if I don't share that, because I think it's really empowering for other people in their pregnancy and in their birth stories to hear positive stories too. Like, yes, we can honor the traumatic stories, the crunchy stories, the sticky stories of pregnancy and parenthood. But every time I've heard a positive story during this past 8 months, it has given me permission to feel good and to also have a positive experience. So I feel really called to share my healthy, positive experience. And I'll let you know how the birth goes. That might be a whole different story. But right now, it's just good. And it has been uncomfortable to accept that, because when one goes through trauma and life has been really hard, I think our nervous system can say, okay, let's make this complicated. Let's make this difficult. And I think that's what I was trying to do subconsciously when I was trying to tap into this baby's karmic ancestors and contracts. It's almost like I was digging for a problem. Like, what's going to be difficult about this? What's going to be hard? And I think that's part of why I'm not meant to know those things right now, is because my body deeply needed and needs to have an experience of smooth ease, peace, grounded energy, to honor and allow that in other parts of my life too, even after the baby's born. So it feels like a boot camp in peacefulness in the body that I haven't quite allowed myself to experience up until this point in life.
I think that that's something that our society is lacking as a collective, and I don't think people are aware of it. I am struggling with chronic pain as we speak. Like, it's been a journey for me, and it's interesting because it's come in waves, and I know it's a teacher, but it's interesting, the layers. It's not psychoanalyzing it. It's not having an expectation for it. It's about just allowing it to be the teacher and just kind of feeling into it, and then just going from there, breathing into it, feeling into it. I'm so curious what the ease has done for you and your nervous system, because again, I think when your nervous system has been dysregulated for so long, you have to reintegrate those energies so that you're in alignment. So what has that process been like for you to realign and to reattune to those frequencies?
It's felt wavy, because it's one thing to note when it's happening, and then it's another thing to let it integrate. There has been experiences that I can tell my subconscious is creating moments of chaos to try to combat the ease. That it just happened this weekend, actually. So I'm definitely speaking from a place of like, I have not mastered this. I don't think it's ever something we ever master, but I just share this because I think it's a great example of the layers of integration of peace and ease in the nervous system. So I had an experience this weekend where I just had a super smooth, easy work experience, guiding a retreat. And my body was like, yes, okay, this feels so good. I'm so grateful. There wasn't like that tension or stress in the body. And then my mind was saying, it's not safe. There's something wrong. What is happening? And I ended up, from my own understanding, like attracting physical pain. And the short version of the story is, once I got back from the retreat, I just said, okay, what does my body need in order to start integrating this? And it said a shower. So I went to go take a shower, and I have a sliding glass door in my shower, and it was sticky. And instead of just like letting it be, I forced it shut, and the whole shower shattered, the whole glass door, and broke all over my hand. My hand was bleeding everywhere. It was really scary and disastrous at the time, and shocking. to my system, it completely shocked my nervous system. And so once I got out of this scenario and I was fine, like my hand's cut up and bruised, it's okay. I realized my subconscious attracted that because it was not feeling safe to allow my body to feel safe. So it created this physical pain experience. So that's kind of what it's looked like. It's been up and down. There's been moments where like my body feels the peace and my nervous system's on board and my mental space is on board. And then there's times where it feels really uncomfortable and something like that will happen. And that's okay. Like I'm at the point where I'm just wanting to observe and not need to change it and trust that the more I practice it and become aware of it, the less of those experiences I'll likely have. Instead of getting upset at myself or my mind for creating chaos, I just meet it compassionately and say like, okay, that makes sense that you created that scenario. You're used to that. And talking to it like I would a child. It's that reparenting again, reparenting my own mind, reparenting my own nervous system, and empathizing with it that the ways that it's created chaos is to keep it safe. Keep it from feeling the immense gift of ease. And I have faith that the more I meet it, again, like the quieter it'll be, and like the more it can go on vacation without worrying about what's happening back here.
That's potent medicine right there. That is potent. I think all of us could use a little bit more of that, right? The permission. Permission to not feel shame.
Yeah, and honestly, as I'm growing in that and as we're growing in it, I've recognized and given myself permission to ask other people for permission in resting, in feeling peace. And I hope to be at a place one day where I don't need that as much. But I just want to voice that. I really believe it's okay to ask our mirrors in our life, our friends, our partners, our family, whoever it is for you, to help you with that permission. And say like, hey, it's okay for you to rest, or it's okay that things are easy, or like, April, I'm so glad that things are easy for you right now. I'm celebrating that with you. I think that sends a message to the body and the nervous system that, oh, my community, like if we're bringing it back biologically, like my tribe is telling me that I don't have to like work hard or make things difficult to have a sense of belonging and love. I think it can get tricky if we rely on that and not do the work for ourselves. But like, what a gift to give ourselves that while we're learning, while it's new for us to accept that level of peace and ease and smooth living. And I'm learning to ask for that.
Yeah. Well, how would you recommend for someone to do the same? Because I think that's an uncomfortable conversation, right? For a lot of folks, because again, it's that little child within just looking for safety, but that can come with, the feeling of not feeling safe. So how would you recommend suggesting someone to do that for themselves?
Yeah, I think starting with someone who feels safe for you is important, because if you ask that from someone who's not necessarily emotionally safe or aware, then it could be more damaging, I believe. So hopefully you have the gift and the privilege of having at least one safe person in your life that will meet you there. And for me, I start with my partner because he is safe in that way and he has the awareness and the value system that believes that we should have ease in our life. So start with someone who believes that you should have ease in your life, right? And I think it's a case-by-case basis, but what it looks like for me is to really just voice the shame or guilt that I'm having and say, hey, I'm noticing that things are really spacious and of ease right now, and it's making me really uncomfortable. And I'm having a hard time leaning into it because I feel like it's meant to be harder than it is, or I feel like you'll judge me. It could also be that they're part of, like, you're creating a story about what they believe about your ease. I think that's something that I believe I'm working with, is when people see me having an easy time, they're going to be mad or not love me or retract. And so I think just owning that through voicing it and just saying, it would be really helpful and healthy for my inner child or my nervous system or whatever is alive and real for you in that moment, if you could witness me in this shame and guilt and reflect back to me some love and care. And for everybody, that might look different. That might look like physical touch. For me, I'm a words of affirmations person. So I ask for words of encouragement to lean into the ease. And my partner over time has understood what that looks like for me. So for him, it looks like encouraging me to rest. He's like, hey, I see you, having a hard time resting and being in the ease. I love you in that. And he even takes it as far as saying, like, I think it's so beautiful when you allow ease in your life, or I'm so attracted to you when you have so much peace in your body. Like, he's gotten to that point where he knows what my inner child likes to hear, or my nervous system. So I think part of it is that, like, training people in your life to meet you where you're at with those healing processes.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that that's super helpful. And I know that it is so specific to the person and what feels good for them. And I think it's important to be mindful of that. Like, make it make sense for you, right? Like, whoever's listening. But I also think that that's an incredible way to mirror back to folks what that feels like for them in their body and how they can internalize that and then ask for it. So thank you again for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and then using that with yourself. So again, you don't have to rely on an external source, but we are in community for a reason. So let's play with the resources of love, of people, of connection that we have to bring soothing and healing to these parts that were hurt by other people. So, like, how the wound happened through other people or neglect or whatever it is for your situation, you get to use or tap into that for the healing too. And most of us have been hurt in relationship. So let's use relationship as a medicine as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is huge. And the more we do that in our communities, the more we heal as a collective. And I think it's so vital, and it's imperative at this point, right? Our earth is calling for us to come back home to her. So even with your shamanic processes of integrating, the spirit and the stories from our ancestors, I would really, really appreciate if you could kind of just share what that integration process was like for you and how that came to be, your mediumship, your psychic abilities, and how those, gifts came online for you. And then how you, again, just integrate that into the work that you do for not only yourself, but for your clients as well.
That's a story of ease as well, because I was listening to my intuition, and I believe I've always been intuitive, but as soon as I stopped denying that, they started to come online more. So when I quit my job as a therapist, I felt called to just go meditate at New Renaissance Bookshop in Portland. And that was like the one thing my intuition was telling me. And sometimes I think we complicate our intuition and we feel like it has to be this big, huge gesture. But it's not always that way. Sometimes it's just go to this place and meditate, go to this park, whatever. So anyway, I was led to New Renaissance, and I had never really heard of Reiki energy healing, but the workshop I attended happened to have a healing practitioner, a teacher there. And she must have felt something in me. She must have intuitively felt something about my soul wanting to learn, because she invited me to learn Reiki with her. And even though I didn't end up learning from her, I ended up learning from her teacher. So it was like that next weekend after I had that experience, I went and learned and went through this big process. And everybody teaches Reiki differently. Everybody experiences it differently. But for me, it felt like this incredible cleansing of blocks to my gifts. And so it was on day one, I believe, we started practicing on each other. And as soon as I touched this person's body, I had huge like downloads about their ancestors and this one dead ancestor that wanted to communicate with her. And I shared it with her, and it completely resonated. And she just said, that's exactly what I needed to hear to move on and heal from this thing with this relative. And so for me, it felt of ease because I was just a messenger. It didn't feel like I had to come up with anything or like create a storyline. It just was all there because I think I had this openness in my body to receive the channel, which happened from some of the trauma clearing out through the Reiki attunement and through, I think, just my own intention of being open to receive whatever gifts God and Spirit wanted for me that day. And I had one other experience like that a long time ago where I touched somebody and had complete downloads about them, but it scared me at the time. So it wasn't my time. And I think this was the divine time, that it was time for me to lean into these gifts. So definitely the Reiki class set it off for me and created this safe container for me to express these gifts, a community to express these gifts in, and normalizing these gifts because other people were playing with them as well and tapping into them. I think that's a huge part of trusting our intuition, is being around other people who are also doing that. So from there, I felt called to start my business. That was 5.5 years ago. And it's evolved ever since. So at first I was just channeling a lot, writing messages for people. When they came in, I'd touch parts of their body, clear energy, tap into pain points, and get messages about what had happened to them, what had happened to their ancestors, how to move forward. It just was a range of medicine through words. And then I went on to study shamanism and ancestral healing and felt really lit up by the concept that we could connect with our dead ancestors for our highest good. And that I realized a lot of them are just waiting for us to hear their stories so that they can stop hanging out in our bodies in such a heavy way. And started doing that work for myself first, started healing my own lineages, hearing their stories, understanding why things happened the way they did, why traumas came up, why blocks existed, and also really celebrating their gifts too. That's a huge part of the ancestral work I love to invite people into, is not just looking at the heavy stories, but the healing stories and the gifts and the affinities that these people that we come from have, and therefore we have in our blood and our DNA. So there's so much fun to be had with the ancestors too, because they want us to carry on those gifts. And kind of circling it back to what we originally maybe we're talking about with this question, is like the earth healing that wants to come through from ancestral work or psychic work. I think those before us tried a lot of things to heal Mother Earth and to connect with her. And so we get to learn from them, and we don't need to start from square one. Like, they have so many resources for us in terms of how do we connect with the earth? How do we connect with the Divine Mother to bring healing to her and to the collective? We're not coming up with this stuff on our own. So if we can go back and connect to those energies and those spirits who had so much experience doing it in their lifetime and continue to show up for us in the realms beyond, it's like tapping into this rich resource that we all have within us that we don't necessarily see, so we forget about. I think that's what's most potent about ancestral healing. Yes, clearing our own energy bodies of pain, trauma, shame, guilt, which therefore clears the energy that we're bringing to the earth, but also tapping into the resources of wisdom and guidance that they have for us about how to live well in relation, how to be in unity, because they either did it well or they didn't do it well, and they want to share that wisdom with us. It's big.
What an invitation. Yeah, that's huge. That is huge. What an invitation for all of us, because I think it's important to note also that intuition is accessible for us all. It's practice. It's definitely a practice. And so much of it comes down to trusting ourselves, right? So it's about how can we get rid of all the stuff that's not allowing us to trust us, and then start tapping into your intuition. So what would you suggest for someone that's looking to enhance their intuition? Because I think it's a really important tool for now, for the present moment of our existence. How would you suggest for someone to kind of go on that journey for themselves?
It's such a big question, and I get it a lot, and I still don't have like this linear answer for it. And maybe that's purposeful and for a reason I trust. But what I would say is identifying the reasons you haven't trusted it yet. Like looking at what conditioning or environments you've been in that have caused you not to trust it. And the reason that I bring that forward is because then you can start to see that it's not necessarily you that you don't trust. It's that you've been taught not to trust yourself. Like that's not true to you that you don't trust yourself. Others have told you not to trust yourself. And I, of course, take the trauma lens approach of like, if you've had any neglect or abuse, you've been taught not to trust the feelings around that. People have probably told you like, you're okay, or it's fine, or just sweep it under the rug, or it's not that big of a deal. And every time we hear something like that, or you're someone who's oppressed and you're taught to not feel those feelings, because if you were to feel those feelings and voice them, you'd be throwing the system out of whack, then it's sending a message to your body that you can't trust yourself. So just recognizing first where the blocks have come from and giving yourself compassion and grace about not trusting yourself, because there's been so much working against you. I think that's the first place to start, meeting that self with compassion. And then the other place to start, I believe, is looking at where you already do trust yourself and celebrating that. All of us have practice and intuition, even if it's just small examples every day. Like, I felt called to go this different route to work, and then I did and realized, oh, there was an accident on the other road and I would have been late for work. Or I didn't want to eat these leftovers in the fridge, and then I realized they're actually bad, and so I'm happy that I didn't eat them. It's like those very earthly ways of practicing intuition, not, oh, I talked to my dead ancestor. Like that's kind of the big, a lot of people want to go there. But it's like, how are you honoring those feelings in your body of a yes or a no now? And from there, we can build to those bigger ways of practicing intuition. And then the other piece is getting out of environments as much as you can that tell you not to trust yourself. And that kind of goes back to the first example that I was sharing. But if you can get in nature as much as possible, nature is such a source of intuition. Nature really wants to speak to you. And so it's really hard to ignore our intuition when we're in nature. And what I mean by that is like getting your headphones out of your ears, not having your phone on you, because that's kind of the conditioning that says you need something else other than what's here for you now, what's in your body, what's in your spirit, what's with nature. So kind of clearing those distractions. That's what wants to be said. Clearing distractions, coming into presence. That's what intuitive development is all about. Clearing distractions, coming into presence. And for me, nature is the best way to do that because it's just so unconditionally loving and wants to show up for you to help you drop into a deeper level of presence. Those are some big steps to start with. So that's what I would say.
That's beautiful. Nature is such a, it's just the best place to return to just feel that ease and that comfort. And it's never, it never lets you down. It's for me in my experience, and pretty much I've never met anyone who has been out like upset to go outside and sit with the earth without a distraction. I think when the distractions are involved, that's when it's like, there's so many other things that are going on in our head. But if we take those distractions out, like you said, it's just put so beautifully. It's then just drop into the presence. It's where the magic happens.
Yeah, it's where the magic happens. And I will say, if you're someone who hasn't spent a lot of time in nature, or you don't have as much access as someone who's more privileged to have access to nature, like you can start with nature sounds, like listening to a meditation with waves and nature sounds on it. You can listen to birds singing through a meditation and start there, so that, again, kind of coming back to the body, your body isn't shocked. Because it can feel shocking if you go from being a distracted person to being in the woods in silence. That can bring up a lot. So maybe you start at this other place first of, okay, listening to some bird sounds, listening to some waves, and then I'm going to get myself outside when that feels more accessible to me.
That is a really important indicator that I've been sitting with myself as medicine. Like, you can't expect yourself to be here and go here without some integration, girl. Like, you need to stop, integrate yourself. Like, that's just the tendency that I've had to work with. And it's a karmic thing. It's like, calm down, chill. You don't need to prove. And I think that so many of us are coming out of that mentality, and whether it be with, not listening to, or not being in a place where you have access to nature, or just not necessarily having that willingness to go and sit and be in silence, it's still that same reframe, right? It's like, just ease yourself. You don't need to go from one level to the next. You don't need to prove anything.
No. Exactly. You don't need to go 0 to 100. What's your 25%? Start there. It's like stretching. You don't need to do the splits right away. Just do one leg at a time. Maybe you touch your knee, That's the sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah, burnout is real when there isn't a sustainable practice involved, for sure.
Yeah, and there's expectations.
I would love for you to share. Expectations are huge, and that's the whole. Going back to just your pregnancy, I just think it's so beautiful that this is what your sweet baby is inviting you into. Just this releasing of expectations, so you can just lean into what's in the present, right, without distraction.
Yes. Yeah, that's beautifully said. Of one of the biggest lessons that I'm present with.
Thank you, baby.
Yes. Thank you, baby.
So special. Can you share what your offerings are. You are such an incredible human being and woman, so intuitively attuned to what spirit has for you. And I think it would be a real honor for anyone to have the privilege to work with you. And I just think that it'd be great if you could just share your offerings and what you're offering for the world so people could potentially work with you.
Thank you. Right now, I offer healing mentorships, and those are generally 6 months long, where we're in an intimate container, one-on-one with each other, doing a lot of the work that we explored in this podcast, talking about the shadow work, moving through the shame and guilt, coming into ease, creating space in your body, your mind, and your spirit to welcome in more abundance, more love, more joy into your life through the beautiful help of our divine ancestors and our guides. So a lot of the work that I'm doing in those spaces with mentorship is the shamanic journeying, the talk therapy. I still weave that in as well. Meditating, somatic practices, and showing up each session and just saying, okay, what kind of medicine is here from your guides, my guides, in spirit. So that's my favorite way to work with people right now, because it's so powerful to be in relationship for that long. 6 months flies by, but it gives us the space to create rapport and relationship enough to be real with each other and allow, really, I think what's happening in those spaces, allow the person's inner child to feel held by me and by my team, which is so healing. So there's that. I am accepting applications for it, so feel free to reach out. And I also, less regularly, but sometimes offer Reiki healing trainings. So teaching people to be their own healer and tap into energy healing to clear and balance the body, the mind, and the spirit. And I have a class coming up in the end of May. And then the other way is through my Awakened Abundance Guidebook, which I just released this week. And it's a self-paced course, essentially, that focuses on healing the inner child, working with your ancestors, meeting your shamanic guides, and tapping into your intuition to create more space for the things that are really important in your life. And that's available on my website, and you can just download it and start working on it. It's set up to be like a 4-month process, and it weaves in meditation, ritual, ceremonies that I've recorded, as well as journaling prompts and exercises to get you more into that intuitive presence to begin and continue these healing journeys. And that's it for now. We'll see what else evolves, especially as baby comes.
Yeah, for sure. Just finding the fluidity and the flow to whatever comes with motherhood, right? And being an entrepreneur, I'm sure that's going to be a dance for sure. But I know you'll be able to bring whatever you learn as a new mama, and even just with birthing a baby into this world, into this planet. And that's going to be a teacher all in itself. So I know you'll be able to use that for good. I know you will.
Thank you. I'm excited to see what that initiation wants me to bring forward into the world, because I am consistently listening, like, okay, what's here? What am I learning that wants to be shared with others? I think that's the active medicine. Like, I'm going through it, alchemize it, share it with the world. So it's always evolving.
Just this ever evolving current of flow. I mean, it really is like the ocean. And I think about waves when we talked about riding the waves before we jumped on and started chatting. And that's so much of what the process is like, riding the waves.
Yep, exactly. Such a space of surrender. You can't know when the wave's coming or where it ends and begins. Just being with it.
Where can people find you on your Instagram and your website. Can you give those deets?
Yeah. So my Instagram is it's April J, Jay. And my website is iamaprilj.com.
Mm. And one last offering, piece of advice, word of wisdom. What would you share with folks?
Ooh. Hmm. To have fun with this journey. I think play and fun is what allows us to keep showing up for it. So if it's feeling serious, how can you invite humor in? How can you invite joy in, play and fun to allow yourself to keep showing up for those deeper, shadowy parts? How can you make reparenting fun? How can you make relationships fun? It's definitely something I'm exploring right now. And to allow your body to show you what fun feels like. It'll show you the way.
Mm. So good. Thank you so much. I always appreciate your energy and all that you emit into space. I feel you and I appreciate you on such a deep level. So thank you.
Thanks for seeing me. Thanks for witnessing me.
Mm-hmm.
I love your energy and I'm just so honored to be in relationship with you.
Same. It's a delight. Thank you so much. All the love. So much grace and gratitude for you, sweet one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey there. It's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too. So if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.